today, everybody, to HR Recruit's webinar called Build Your Strength and Impact as a HR Professional. My name is Jo Thompson and I'm a consultant for HR Recruit. I'm joined today by Marion Hewitt and Deborah Wilkes, who will introduce themselves shortly. They're going to be sharing their knowledge and findings from research carried out by both Marion and Deborah, as well as research from CIPD and McKinsey. There's a lot of material to cover, but if you do have any burning questions during the session, then please put them into the chat box facility and we will try and cover them at the end. I'm now going to hand you over to Marion and Deborah, who will introduce themselves and start the webinar.
Thank you, Jo. Well, when Deborah and I started to plan or have our conversations, we hadn't quite anticipated the level of response we would have to our topic, which has been really, really encouraging and exciting because it gives the opportunity for real conversations about how we can build our strength and impact. And my route to here is a lot of years in HR, and Deborah and I worked out how many years between us and we decided we didn't want to share that number, but lots of industries, different sectors, different types of roles. And in more recent years, my focus has been more around this positive psychology, the well-being, that actually how we can support and help ourselves to be the best version of ourselves, which in turn enables us to make the impact. And then Deborah and I I think we connected on LinkedIn and realised that actually how we approach things, we both have a real passion for the profession. We really believe we can have a huge impact for organisations and can continue to do so. But actually the way we were coming at it was really well aligned. So Deborah, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so it was great meeting Marion because we both really do share this mission that HR is such an important function. You guys have the opportunity to impact so many people for good. And yet it can be quite a tough job because you're also balancing the fact that you've got maybe business leaders around who aren't naturally supportive. So it can be a tough job. So my background was in HR as Marion's. I worked my way up the hard way, did my CIPD, I'm now fellow, and then about 25 years ago realized that the bit that I enjoyed most is developing people. So I left, and since then I've been doing leadership and management development. So for a long time I did it for any function. And then a few years ago, I really started to reconnect with HR. And of course, HR people are often my clients. And I was realizing that actually HR people are still having exactly the same problems that I had 25 years ago. So my team and I, we decided to, when we set up Enable HR, we decided to research that. And so our approach tends to be quite behavioral, really. It's saying what are the behaviors and the activities that help HR people to move to the next level. So we've got a nice pairing here because Marion's looked at the psychology of that. So when we bring those two things together, we hope you'll really enjoy this webinar.
Thank you. So our topic is build your strength and impact as an HR professional in 2023. And what we're going to be covering, if you bring the slides up for us. And what we are going to be covering, if you just put the next one up, please, is that reach in and reach out. Now that phrase came, I think it was as Deborah that threw it in as a comment when we were chatting, and we suddenly thought actually that's what we're about. It's about how we can reach in to overcome those internal obstacles, the ones around confidence, imposter syndrome, things that so many conversations we've had have told us resonate with a lot of people. And then from that, how we can reach out to present ourselves and work effectively with the stakeholders. And alongside that, recognizing how we can get that alignment, how we can be authentic in that, because we do know, we were having quite a long chat about this the other day, where we have that tension with sometimes, the organization organisational, the strategic requirements, and when we want to be, the ambassador, and we're hearing things from the employees side, and there's a tension from that. So, being aware of all of that, and then how we can increase our strength and impact. So the next thing I would ask you to think about is, and please use the chat, it's open, so you will be able to see where people's comments are. So as we are approaching or heading towards the end of the first month of the year, as we're into 2023, as an HR professional, how are you feeling in your current role? We know we've had some challenging years. We think we've overcome one thing and then it will get a bit easier and then something else happens. And we've looked at data that's been telling us how people are feeling in the profession. But actually, as you're sitting here today, how are you feeling about whatever you're needing to be dealing with through the year? So that'd be really interesting to see people's thoughts around that, and just put them into the chat and we'll pick them up. Positive and keen to, oh, great.
Good start.
Like that one. Overwhelmed but optimistic. Yeah, I suspect quite a lot of people would identify with that. Yes, we're not likely to get to the end of our to-do list, I suspect. Yeah, positive. Yeah. Feel HR valued many complex challenges. Yeah. So thank you. Those are things I think we've heard a lot. So hopefully the first thing for you all being here is actually not feeling alone, in that sense of lots to do, lots of opportunities, but actually how do we do that and put our time in the right places. So let's look at some of the research that when people have gone out and asked the wider profession, how are people feeling? And the first one we've got, one before, please. What's it? Is from, this is quite a while ago, well, nearly a year ago now, I guess. So this was a survey that looked at people in the profession, and people were saying that 2020 was a bad year, and then 2021 actually didn't get a lot better. And some of those feelings that people were expressing: overworked, understaffed, over emotionally exhausted, just not being able to do all the things that they wanted to do, feeling they're not meeting all the expectations, and the challenges that was creating. And then if we look at the CIPD survey, actually about the people profession, which is one that is done every year. And this, as with all data, you can look at some good, that you can interpret things as being good, or so just over half of people in HR feel that their mental health is good or very good, and the same with physical health. But alongside that, a fifth of people felt that their mental and physical health was either poor or very poor. And actually there was a consensus that they viewed their health as being generally less good than other people in the workforce. And the statistic that positive career expectations were associated with better health actually is no surprise when we look at the things that we know in terms of psychological well-being and overall health. Actually, if we've got meaning and purpose, if we've got engagement and flow in the work we're doing, it has a real positive impact on our well-being. So, that bit is really not a surprise. Mm. And then Sage did some research last year, and that was about looking ahead beyond this year even. And these figures are frankly frightening. 81% feeling burnt out, 61% are considering leaving the profession. However, what I'd like to put a couple of sort of caveats around those two figures. I shouldn't go past it. What we actually mean by burnout. So if we were to look at how the World Health Organization talks about burnout, that is an occupational phenomenon, which is about long-term mismanagement of extreme levels of stress. And my perspective is it's 100% preventable. But the challenge is we often haven't recognized it. Now, when people hit burnout, the battery is flat. They're not functioning. They're not engaged. There is nothing left. And that's very different from feeling overwhelmed, stressed, but still functioning. So I think we have to be a bit mindful about how we're using terminology. Nevertheless, that is a significant proportion of the population within HR that are feeling things that are a little bit out of control. And then that leaving the profession, we were hearing so much about the Great Resignation, and again recognizing there's a bit of a difference between intention to quit and actually whether people take action to do so. So looking at those things, as with all data, it can be open to interpretation. And then what did I find when I was looking at my research, which was couple of years ago now, and I chose this as an area from studying positive psychology and becoming more aware of the power of self-compassion, the power of self-kindness, and how actually it unlocks so much potential, but actually we tend not to access it. We have ways of working that are actually not helpful. And my sample was very much female HR professionals. I chose that specifically because although the data is complex, generally women have lower levels of self-compassion than men, and we know that women are a significantly high proportion of the profession. It's about 86%, but it decreases in the more senior levels. I'm just looking at some notes here. I think they're being answered in the chat. So I chose that to actually see if we were not accessing the benefits of self-compassion, what was getting in the way. And the consistent theme, and from all the conversations I've had since, actually people recognise this. We'll put we think we might have already put them into the chat. We're putting links to all our research that you can get copies of later. But low self-worth, putting others first and striving for better. So low self-worth, that's where the self-doubt, the lack of confidence, low self-esteem comes in. So how can we help people with that? And then the putting others first and the striving for better. These are things that you could look at, if you like, as overdone strengths, because I'm not suggesting we shouldn't be thinking about others at all. It's a case of when we do that to the extreme and it's at our detriment. And the same, striving for better is great if it's about continuous improvement, but if it's from a perspective of perfectionism or never thinking anything we do is good enough, that's very different. So, these are barriers to actually helping us show up and be in the best place we can be to do all the things that we want to do. But let's make it a little bit more positive. So the next data, or a lot more positive actually, this also came out of the webinar, the research from Sage. 57% love working in HR, 91% of HR leaders are excited about the future. So that is a really positive thing. And obviously the fact you're here, I'm going to make the probably fairly logical assumption you're part of that community. So actually, what can we do? So let's move on. So Deborah, do you want to pick up from the side of what's been expected of us when we're out there with our positive intentions and all the things we want to do?
Yeah, so one of the things that I've been looking at is the way the expectations that organizations have of HR, how are they developing? And there's a lot of research that says that the expectations are going up, which is great. And so when I wanted to pull all the research together, in fact, rather than the McKinsey one, I picked this Gartner one because actually it sums things up really nicely, that when we think about all the changes, because really the world has changed, hasn't it? So much. Who could ever have predicted what's happened? And we've got these 4 key themes: new hybrid ways of working. I'm guessing everybody in the audience here is dealing with that. Changing employee expectations. We can't just tell them what to do anymore. We can't tell them where to work. They're even rethinking why they work as well as how they work. Everything needs to go faster. And obviously there is more and more use of technology. So when Gartner analysed what this means for HR, they came up with these 3 clear priorities. One of them is that HR needs to be more flexible and agile, and that's not something we're naturally great at. More strategically aligned, so being much more business-led. And third, more operationally efficient. And I think that's something that HR people are striving to do all the time. And in our own research, we looked at how HR can get to the next level. So one of the things that I found out when I really started talking to HR people closely again was that HR people really wanted to move to the next level, but they didn't know how. And so that's what we researched. And so this arrow helps us to differentiate what these levels look like. And we've got a poll here. So I'll stop sharing so that Joe can launch the poll. So we're going to ask you where you spend the most of your time. No, she's not looking optimistic. Don't worry.
It's not allowing me to do it because it's saying it's ended.
Oh.
Hold on a minute.
Does it say relaunch?
Yeah.
Right.
There you go.
Here we go. Right. So please say where you feel you spend what your team and you personally, where do you spend most of your time? Clearing up the mess after client groups manage matters, people matters poorly. I remember that well. Responding well operationally, but feeling catch-up mode. Involved early in executing HR activities that support the business strategy. And then finally out in front where you really are involved in the strategic decisions. So you're not just in feeling as if they're telling you and you're doing it afterwards. So look forward to seeing the results.
Do you want me to end it, Deborah?
Yeah, we had lots of votes in.
Yeah, I'll end it.
Cool. Okay. Oh, look at that. That is actually, just to reassure you, that is actually quite typical when I run this poll. And of course, I'm laughing because I just know how awful that is. You know, clearing up the mess after client groups manage people matters poorly. So if you're doing a lot of casework, and to be honest, if it doesn't matter how senior you are, you could be a CHRO and still have to do that, even though the people that are involved might be more senior. And then it's quite typical that most people actually put themselves in this zone, which is, well, yeah, we're getting the job done, but we never quite feel like we've caught up. And then it's good. We've got 17% of you saying, actually, we're involved quite early. When I dig a bit deeper with this, I often find that people will say, well, yes, but if they'd involved me earlier, I could have been more organized. I could have, like they say, right, we're going to be going to this new product area in 6 months' time, they tell you. And you think, well, if you could have told me that 6 months ago, that would have given me longer to actually set up a pipeline. And then finally, out in front, involved in strategic decisions, we've got 7% in there. Well done is all I would say to that. So thank you. Do close the poll and I'll share the slides again. So the point about this is that this has an impact on your mental health, on your strength and on your resilience. If you're spending most of your time here in the red zone or the blue zone, then that's going to have an impact on your well-being, because you don't get the satisfaction of thinking, right, that's it, I'm up to date, done a good job, can go home with a good feeling. So when we asked in our research, and there's a link to our research there and in the chat, we asked them, why is it hard to move forward? So this is where we want you to think about some of the causes as well as some of the strategies. One is the mindset of business leaders. Now, if you're in that group, the red or the blue, where you're having to clear up mess, I'm guessing that one of the things you suffer from is the mindset of business leaders, because they're not cooperating, they're not being proactive, they're not instilling the right approach, for example, to performance management into their own teams. So we end up having to go in there and sort it out. Resource issues speaks for itself. Proving the value of HR is really challenging. And I've been doing a lot of work on that for the workshops that I run, because I think that's so core. Your ability to influence decisions. And of course, again, if you're in the red or the blue zone, how are you ever going to find time to do that, get in the right meetings and influence decisions? And also there was a theme that was about the mindset of HR. Some people, so we had a lot of free text in this survey. And some people said, actually, it's our own HR leadership that aren't helping us. And in other cases, it was kind of leaking through people's comments that they didn't feel strong enough to take it on. So that's where this webinar comes in. So I'll hand back to Marion to pick this up.
Thank you. And with those themes, we were having great conversations around, how those things are interconnected. That mindset of HR is so linked to that influencing piece. Have we got the confidence to speak up, as Deborah was just saying? So, we can never look at these things in total isolation. But let's think about, to do our best, to be our best, to feel our best. What actually do we need to be doing? And I was just thinking about it as continuums come into so many things that we look at, but the continuum between poor health through to flourishing. So if we are not feeling well, whether that's physical ill health, mental ill health, or our overall health, and bearing in mind, World Health Organization defines health as a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. So if we're down there, we're not going to be doing our best or feeling our best. But then we move up to looking at enhancing our well-being, and the model I use a lot of well-being talks about well-being as being a place when we have a balance between the resources we have and the challenges we have available. And what we tend to find, and it's kind of natural that it happens, that when the challenges increase, we put all our efforts into dealing with those challenges and we take our eye off looking after ourselves. So we get an imbalance and our well-being decreases. So when we're finding things tough, when we're looking at all the challenges we've got, all the things we want to do, the impact we want to make, that's when we've got to be really careful that we are looking after ourselves. It's not any of the selfish or all the things that people tell me that gets in the way. Actually, it's about investing in ourselves to do everything else. And then the next bit, the flourishing, I just love that word, that it has kind of an energy and a positive whole feeling about it. But what do we mean by flourishing? And that comes very much from, this is what positive psychology is about, that science of making life better. And the father, if you like, of the positive psychology movement is Martin Seligman, and his PERMA model sets out from his research what are the pillars we need in place to help us get to that state of flourishing. And I mean, arguably we never actually totally get it. It's working towards. All these things are about working towards. And just put something in there, actually that doesn't mean there's anything wrong with where and who we are now. One of the whole things with our psychological well-being is that self-acceptance. Yes, I am of value as I am now. It doesn't mean to say there aren't things I might change or areas I want to grow, but actually I have value now. So the flourishing pillars, that feeling positive, feeling good, having those emotions. And that's not just about, quoting mindful, positive statements, quotes. It's about what are we constructively doing that actually helps us build those positive emotions. One of the interventions in positive psychology that I talk about a lot is the gratitude diary. At the end of the day, 3 things that I'm grateful for. And just, they don't have to be big things, but it just helps our brain think more positively. We have a natural negativity bias. So, what can we do to help, create that better balance? That engagement, finding flow, that feeling when you're so wrapped up in something, anything could be happening around you and you wouldn't notice. And, what factors do we need in place? What things are we doing that actually increases that likelihood of finding flow? I mean, we'll never be in it all the time, but actually, how can we feel it a bit more? The importance of relationships. Every model of well-being will mention this in some way or other. We are not designed to be on our own, and we need authentic, meaningful connections in our world. People that are in our corner, the people that we can be our natural self with. And how do we cultivate, enrich, and appreciate those? So think about all these things. Where could you be doing a little bit more? I mean, there are lots of specific things we can, but obviously today we're just doing very, very top level. And then, you know, the meaning, the purpose, existence. Yes, we're at work because we need to pay bills, vast majority of us. So, you know, but we do choose some work that we get some meaning for, but something that we actually get some intrinsic value for. So how can we make sure we're aligning those things in our world? And achievement, that sense of accomplishment. You know, it's not about any huge awards or, you know, major necessarily things, but actually just that sense of satisfaction of a job well done. And I think one of the interesting things in terms of, you know, goals and working towards goals, you know, as a coach, I spend a lot of time talking about goals and goal setting. But from a well-being perspective, working towards goals that have meaning for us have a greater positive impact on our psychological well-being than when we achieve something, because then we feel that immediate boost, if you like, but actually it's not as sustaining in terms of our psychological well-being as that working towards something. And then the last pillar was added by McQuain and Kern a few years ago now, which was that physical health bit, on the bit that actually recognizing you can't flourish in the totality if you don't also have physical health. So what actually do we need to do? And I've been doing a lot of sessions over the last few weeks on self-care. I'm offering out some free ones for January, and I've had literally hundreds and hundreds of people that have signed up, which has been brilliant. And my approach to self-care is it's not about, you know, having to have a soak in the bath with soft music and candles for an hour every evening. Sometimes it is about what are those things we are doing that are not helpful? You know, where can we put better boundaries in? What are the things that actually are having a negative impact on our well-being that we could change? So just sort of repositioning our approach to self-care. Doesn't mean to say we can't do those really nice things once in a while, but actually it's a much more holistic approach. So the physical, the psychological, the social, what are the things you might do in those areas that would help your overall well-being? Because actually, if we want to be that person that shows up to have that strength and the impact that we want, we've got to be investing in ourselves, in our well-being, in our working towards that flourishing, to have the confidence, whatever language you use, whether it's self-compassion, confidence, self-esteem, self-worth, to actually be able to do that. So where do we think, where would we put ourselves now in terms of, just put the next slide up. Yeah, how equipped do you feel in terms of that? So I think we've got the next poll now, haven't we? You've got the next poll now?
Just 1 second.
So if we think about, you know, how do we want to reach in to then be able to reach out and meet all the challenges we want? So if you would like to, how equipped do you feel from 1 not at all to 9 totally and completely capable and confident? So just put in your instinctive score. The number will have come straight into your mind. Don't do an internal negotiation. Just put down that number. There's no right or wrong. And it's not exactly a scientific poll, but just be interesting.
And it's anonymous.
And good point. And it's anonymous. So please just put in what you think. And when you think we've got a good proportion of people that have responded, if you want to close it, Jo, and share the results. There we go.
Can you see all of them there?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. So yeah, so a range.
That's not bad, is it?
Actually, my instinctive response is actually there's more blue in the second half of that table than the top. So that is encouraging. You know, shame that there are some people right at the lower ends of those scores, but you know, think about some of the small things that you can do that can start helping. You know, with all changes, actually don't set big expectations, just think about the small things that you can do. So if we take that down and then start thinking about, okay, so we're looking at our internal resources, then what? How can I be reaching out? What can I be looking at doing? So pass on to Deborah to look at that a bit more.
Yeah, so just recapping a point of the reach in and the reach out. I have to say, I find this a really useful way of looking at things, to say, first of all, I need to recognize my feelings. And there will be some people who actually really was going to say something rude there, but who really don't help you, who make you angry, who maybe their behavior is confusing, you don't feel you get on with them. And those relationships have an impact on how you feel internally. But one of the messages we want to give you on this webinar is that there is probably more that you can do about those relationships than you realize. So if you start by imagine your typical table. I don't know if you've got all the functions around your table. We've got these core problems in the middle, and basically that everybody is trying to work on those same core problems, but they all come at it from a completely different direction. And one of the things that happens in today's organizations is that they are designed really with a person that designed the matrix structure, which I'm sure most of you are in. It was designed to make sure that inside the organization, we have the conflict that exists outside the organization. So they're asking us to sort it out internally. And that's why we can find ourselves in situations where there are all sorts of tensions. And a key point I want you to take on is that most of it is not personal. You can think that it is. That guy that just keeps giving me a hard time, you can think it's because they don't like me. You know, you think it's personal. Actually, it isn't. It's just that they have goals that are conflicting with yours. So it helps us to understand where the conflict is coming from. So if we think about the wider organization, in HR, obviously there are policies that we have to, I don't like using the word police, but it sums it up really. In this room with just HR people, we do have to make sure that they're being followed. And there are things in the wider organization that cause tensions, whether it's the pay policy or whatever. So my suggestion is that you categorize what the sources are of the tensions that you feel, because sometimes you can influence them and sometimes you can't. So if it's the fact that the pay policy is really making people walk in through the door with their issues, then try not to worry about that so much, because it really isn't your fault. Issues with your own team, colleagues and stakeholders, probably you can tackle. And I'm going to come on to that. And then, of course, there's your role and your work. And I would encourage you to tackle that as well with your boss. So if you do a little chart and scribble into the different circles where your real sources of tension are, my hope is that it will help you to break them into bite-sized pieces and have a strategy to deal with them. Because also that text on the left is saying that you also have people in your network who are sources of support and context. Sometimes when you think, why on earth is so-and-so doing that? There probably actually is a good reason. Like when I was in my corporate role and there was a headcount freeze, even though my part of the organization was growing and we had loads of vacancies, once the global head of HR was able to say to me, we've got to get this number down before the analysts report in April, I thought, oh, right, okay, I get it. Because otherwise I just look stupid saying to these guys, no, you can't fill that vacancy. So sometimes there is a context and it helps us to find out what that is. So I encourage you to do this as well, your top 5 stakeholders. And the important thing is to think about your relationship with them. So you might actually have somebody that you like, you get on very well with, you chat with at the coffee machine or whatever is your virtual equivalent. However, they let you down. They don't meet deadlines. Because the point of looking at relationships with the reach out part of this session is to look objectively at the impact that they are having on your ability to do your job, and therefore probably your feeling of well-being. So do a bit of evaluation, and where you've got people in the red or the orange, then just bank that and think, okay, so that means that I need to do some work on them. And if it's that you don't know them very well yet, they still need to be in the red or the orange. Hopefully you haven't got too many reds. And then there's the question of deciding, who are you going to tackle? And there are some where there is a high impact on you. So up here on this continuum, if somebody is really having a high impact on you, then I would take some time to really, really think about how to tackle that. There are ways to tackle any relationship, because if it's really, really affecting you, then you can improve your mental health by sorting that out. And sometimes you can just peel away the layers of why you're in conflict with each other, because it isn't personal, it's organizational. And it might be that actually it would be very easy to just sit down with that person to just say, you know what, the way I work with you is really important to me. You have a really big impact on me in my role. And I don't know what it's like for you, but this isn't working very well for me. Could we have a meeting to talk about that? So you take the whole thing offline. Trust is a really important part of that. And if you want to dig deeper into trust, then this is a really good model. And what it's really saying is that we trust people when they're credible, and that's usually about the whole way they come across. Reliability means do they do what they say they are going to do? So ask yourself, do I do what I say I'm going to do? Intimacy is really this feeling of whether you're comfortable with them. So you can have somebody that you're very comfortable with, but actually they let you down. But then the point of this being a formula is that self-orientation, which is below the line, what that is saying is you could have somebody with you could have high credibility, high reliability, high intimacy. But if you think that all they're doing is looking after their own interests and driving their own agenda, then you will not trust them. But that is something that you could discuss in a meeting, because they might say, well, actually, that's because of this and it's because of that. And then you begin to understand them. Because conflict is built into today's organizations. So a classic one might be in HR, we tend to do things that take ages. A talent initiative. Well, we're expressing it in HR language, which isn't very helpful. Because somebody in operations, for example, is going to say, well, yeah, that all sounds great, but I don't know how I'm going to meet this month's target. And we need to recognize that. And our survey really revealed some stuff about HR's beliefs. And there are two here that I'd like to pick out. One is, what are your beliefs about the value you add? Because if you believe it, if you've got it, you can give it, it will come out. And then if you have a strong belief, it shows in your behavior. And then people notice that and they think, oh yeah, I'm really starting to get where that person's coming from. They're helping me to understand what the real value of HR is. You get good feedback from them and that reinforces your beliefs, and you have a really positive cycle. But it has to start with your own beliefs. So I go into this more in our report. And then, of course, this second belief. Do you believe that HR can change how things are? Because if you don't believe that, then you might be one of those people who are in the red or the blue zone. It's like, I've just got to keep going like this because I can't change it anyway. And that's really hard, and I sympathize. And one of the things, I just want to give you this quick technique, which is to say, we're quite good at asking questions in HR. So I think you've probably got good questioning skills. We can all improve on them. But the thing I urge you to think about in order to be stronger is to state very clearly, more often, why HR do what they do, and do it in the business person's language. So I'll hand back to Marion here for us to review with you. And this is maybe a good time for us to take questions. So I'll stop sharing, but just to point out on the last slide, as well as in the chat, we've got how to contact us, and we would love to hear from you.
Thank you. So we've only been able to cover very small elements, really. Just, you know, a lot of it is just sharing our thinking on a lot of the areas. But actually, we hope it's triggered some thoughts for you. And in terms of a plan, so actually, well, I hope you found it interesting, but actually, so it's also been a productive hour that you spent with us. What specifically can you take away from this time? What has actually really resonated with you? What are things that you could do differently? So that we're all, probably most of us, familiar with the stop, start, continue model, but it works. Let's go with it. You know, what things are you currently doing that are perhaps not helpful to yourself that you can change? You know, what might be those inner beliefs that are getting in the way? And again, I recognize it's not as simple as just deciding to change an inner belief. They've been in there for a long time. There's a long reason why they're there. But actually, there are techniques that we can develop. But just at a very simple level, just notice them, challenge them. So, you know, what might you stop doing? What might you notice you've done in your role? Oh, thank you. Things are coming into the chat, which is great. So, yeah. You know, what could you stop doing that's not helpful in how you have an impact? You know, if somebody says to you, have you got 5 minutes? And you always say yes. Actually, that's not necessarily helpful to how you make an impact, or, you know, but we do it because we think we have to be available, is what I usually hear. We don't like to say no, but actually just take a step back. There's ways of saying no. You know, I've got this to finish. Could we catch up later? Or can you put some time in my diary? Or sometimes we do say yes, but just think about that side of it. The continue, what are you currently doing that you know is helping you? You know, it supports your sense of self, the authentic self. You know where you've got good relationships, you've built great collaboration with your stakeholders, and you want to continue. And then think about a couple of things that you might start doing. So don't set yourself huge, great goals. You know, think about those small steps, because they can be incremental steps. So, you know, if anybody's read any of that work, James Clear and that Atomic Habits, about how you change habits, you know, start creating small changes that you then get used to, and then you can build on. So I love that. Continue being enthusiastic and brave. Yes, that's a great one to have in the chat. Thank you for putting that. So just make a few notes and just think about what you might want to do. And are there any particular questions? You know, stop taking things to heart. Some of these things that, you know, they're a lot easier said than done, because as Deborah was saying, we do have a tendency to take things personally, you know, rather than sort of take it out, put it in the middle as this is an issue. This isn't about whether I'm of value as a person. This is about we have a disagreement, or we have a different way to reach an outcome. So it's not about me. And, you know, again, as Deborah said, you know, we might wonder why somebody is reacting. The model I use a lot is that idea of window of the world. We all have our own frame of reference. We all come to this point with a different perspective, and it's equally valid. Doesn't necessarily mean it's the same. So continue being authentic self. Great. Yeah. Start explaining HR perspective and why. Yeah. And actually, again, as Deborah, you know, making sure we're using the right language, so that actually we're talking to our stakeholders in the way that resonates with them. You know, what's keeping them awake at night, and actually making sure what we're saying is aligned with that. Any things that you want to pick up from the chat, Deborah? Just mindful of the time. Any particular questions? Yeah,
I just want to mention, while people are thinking about questions, There's a Harvard Business Review article that I picked up yesterday, and I posted about it today, and it's really interesting because what these people did, these three ladies did, they interviewed 43 senior women who are on boards, and just about everything that they said for me resonated with whatever level you are in HR and whatever gender you are in HR. They call it the warmth competence line. And what they're saying is that when we are warm and approachable, that can be perceived by some people as weakness. And yet we know in HR that we've got to, you don't know whether somebody who walks into your office, virtual or whatever, they might be failing, they might have just been bereaved, they might be sick, they might be stressed or having terrible financial problems. You don't know what it is. And they need to feel that they can talk to you. However, for HR to play its really, the full potential of its role in organizations, we do need to build the harder edge. And this is where I think the best approach is to really plan what you want to say and rehearse it. And so when you're doing your HR advocacy, and repeat it as well, say the same thing more than once so that actually people begin to hear it. Whether it's, in HR, we are committed to being driven by the business. Tell me what you need. Just keep saying it. Thank you.
So yeah, somebody's actually just put in about Jacinda Ardern's, and I saw your post this morning, and I got sidetracked rather than responding, but that was exactly what came into my mind. All the discussion about actually how she did epitomise or clearly demonstrate that actually that compassionate leadership doesn't make it less effective. So that was really interesting.
I suppose the other message from that is that she got exhausted in the end, and you can't help thinking that that's because she was kind of butting up against people all the time who weren't the same, and she had small children.
Yes. Yeah, I think we could get into a great conversation about that whole situation, because there's so many perspectives on that that's interesting.
Yeah.
But in terms of the things we've been covering today, because when we were planning it, there was so much stuff we wanted to put in. We have actually developed a separate workshop that's up to half-day one that we'll send out some information if you're interested in joining that, which gives a lot more tools and ideas and gives more of an opportunity for discussion than we have in this. So I can't see any particular questions. There's lots of great comments, which is really nice to hear people's perspective. So thank you for that. So I think, yeah, that really brings us to all the end we wanted to cover in that. I hope it's given you real food for thought in terms of that reach in and reach out, and a few ideas of things that you might take away and do. So can I pass back to you, please, Jo?
Yeah, lovely. Thank you very much to Marion and Deborah for sharing your knowledge. It's been a very insightful and very informative event, and I'm sure that everyone's taken quite a lot away from it. I will send out some correspondence, as I've said in the chat box, to the people that have signed up for the event, and put a post on LinkedIn telling you how you can access a copy of the recording and the slides. Next week, we're running 2 virtual boardrooms, one on Tuesday the 31st of January, which is called Leadership Challenges of Hybrid Teams. And we've got another one next Thursday, which is called HR Group Supervision. Details about how to sign up for these will be included in the email.
Wow.
We've also got a guild networking group for HR professionals. It's a bit similar to WhatsApp, where group members can ask questions, network and share ideas. I will send out a link on the email, so if you haven't done and would like to, then please join that. If anyone is recruiting, then obviously I work for HR Recruit. We've also got Accountancy Recruit and FD Recruit within the group. But otherwise, finally, I would like to say a massive thanks to Marion and Deborah for your time and effort into putting the event together. And also thank you very much to all the listeners for tuning in. Thank you.